it's Barb, Maple PhD, and I went to the Dice Tower retreat last month and I had the opportunity to try out 30 new to me games, and I thought I'd try something a little bit different here. I'm going to give some first impressions about each of those games in about 2 sentences. So let's see if I can do this. 30 games in 60 sentences. Ariel is a polyomino game where you are trying to pack your block party as full as a Tetris game. And this really does bring Tetris to life with the charm of beautiful art and the fun of trying to match light colors together in order to have friends at your party. Athenaeum Magic Library is a card drafting game where you are putting books in a shelf trying to match certain configurations. I liked the drafting mechanism in this game, but it probably would have been a little more interesting with more than 2 players. And to be honest, if I'm going to play a magic book shelving game, it's probably going to be Ex-Libris. Beyond the Sun is a space civilization game where you and the other players are building up a tech tree in order to explore the galaxy. This game had amazingly thinky decisions that I really enjoyed, and I loved the bonus that all of the exoplanet systems in the exploration deck were real, so that I could go Google and find out some facts about them. Carnival of Monsters is a card drafting game where you are capturing monsters who live in various fantastical lands. It is a quick, snappy game where the art is beautiful, the gameplay is simple, but there are some fun and sometimes agonizing decisions. Cascadia is a tile drafting game where you are building out a landscape, trying to keep in mind the needs of various animals that you'll be placing. It plays very simply, but those simple rules hide a puzzly game. Christmas Tree is a card drafting game where you are building out a festive tree, trying to match certain patterns of ornaments and connect up the same color of lights. It was a surprisingly thinky game with some agonizing decisions about which cards to keep, which ones to pass on to your opponent as you were chasing after some of the various goals. Circadian's First Light is a dice worker placement game where you are building up your resources, spiffing up your research base, and trying to make alliances with the locals. It was a super fun game that had a lot of options, even if the dice didn't quite roll the way you wanted them to, or one of your opponents took the position that you wanted. Cloud City is a tile placement game where you are also building up towers and networks of pathways around the city in the clouds. It was a very pretty looking game that ultimately ended up being too simple for our tastes, but might be a great family game. Corellia is a dice drafting game where you are placing colorful dice on their matching places on a reef in order to collect fish, pearls, turtles, and treasure chests. It was a fairly fast-paced, filler-weight game with a lot of luck, but some ways to mitigate it, and fast enough that we really enjoyed it. Cubitos is a race game where you are building up a pool of dice in order to move your character around the Cube Cup racetrack as quickly as possible. Pool building and dice chucking, there is very little in the game world that makes my heart sing more. Dive is a programming game where everyone is looking at a clear stack of cards, trying to figure out how far down the sharks are. This game is a lot about the gimmick of that stack of cards, but it works really well and the art is gorgeous. Endangered is a cooperative game where players are trying to keep a species alive long enough while they woo ambassadors from around the world to help save that species. We played this on a normal mode and found it to be a very tight but enjoyable challenge. The Faceless is a cooperative game where you must move around the board according to a compass that's being affected by magnetic pieces. This was an interesting challenge, though I'm not sure that the magnet gimmick worked 100%. We still had fun with it. Fast Sloths is a pick up and deliver game where you are aligning various animals in order to pick up your sloth and move it around the board. We only played with 2 players, so while we had fun with it, I think it would be a lot more fun with more players when chaos ensues all over the entire board. The Loop is a cooperative game where you are trying to defeat Dr. Foe by keeping his duplicates at bay and closing up time rifts. We found this to be a very tight co-op game with some great puzzles for how to keep the board under control while also fulfilling your goals. Magic Fold is a real-time puzzle game where you are folding a handkerchief in order to reveal certain symbols in a race to the finish. This was super fun and super diabolical. Some of those folds were really hard to figure out. Majesty for the Realm is a card drafting game where you are recruiting characters into your kingdom in order to build up your wealth. This one had some interesting decisions, trying to determine whether you wanted to go all in on one character or spread the wealth across all your different buildings. My Farm Shop is a dice rolling engine building game where the decisions you make on your turn affect all other players. The cute theme on this might be deceiving because it hides a game with much deeper decisions than I was expecting. Nidavellir is an auction and set collection game where you are wooing dwarves into your army. Now at 2 players this wasn't that great, but even though I'm not a super big fan of auction games, I could see this being really fun with a lot of players. The Princess Bride Adventure Book game is a cooperative game where players are moving Buttercup and Wesley from the farm to a happy ending. This was a light, fun challenge that we really enjoyed playing through once, but ended up being a little too easy for us to want to go back to it again and again. Santa Monica is a card drafting game where you are building up a neighborhood in Southern California in order to please locals and tourists alike. The gameplay was super simple, but again had some really great decisions about which buildings to get, especially since some of them had special powers that would let you move people around or get the right people to do some big scoring at the end of the game. Scooby-Doo Escape from the Haunted Mansion game is an escape room style game where using the characters that we all know and love. They nailed the characters in this game, and we had a great time working our way through the mystery, even though we might have struggled with a couple of the puzzles. Sierra West is an action programming and deck building game where players are mining the mountain while collecting resources and building up their camps. I'm not gonna lie, I had a bad experience with the rules in this game, and so we didn't like it very much, but I could be convinced to try it again with someone who knew the rules really well. Stardew Valley, the board game, is a cooperative game simulation of the popular video game where you are building a farm, making friends, fishing and mining in order to fulfill your grandfather's legacy and repair the town's community center. I actually liked this more than the video game, but unfortunately we got one of the goals that seemed almost impossible, and that soured the experience for my spouse. A Study in Emerald is a mashup between a deck builder with area control and some hidden roles, as players are either working for or against the old ones who rule the world. This ended up not being a great game experience for me because I was one of the ones opposing the old ones, and my options became very limited very quickly, so I ended up working to finish the game fairly quickly. Summer Camp is a deck building game where players are all trying to race to be the best at all of the camp activities. This was a super charming game that brought me back to being at summer camp, but ultimately it was a little too light to be something that I would buy for my game shelf, but I would certainly play it again. Tribes is an action selection game where players are building up their lands and learning new technologies in order to become the best Bronze Age civilization. I liked the action selection portion of this, but the learning new technologies ended up feeling fairly random. Tyrants of the Underdark is a deck building game with troops and spies on a map where you are trying to control different regions throughout the game. I liked this game much more than I expected, using my cards in my deck to put out new troops and spies, and it worked surprisingly well for 2 players. Wishland is a worker placement game where you are building up your theme park with rides, attractions, hotels, and mascots. I love theme park games, and this one has quickly risen to close to the top of my list, even though I have played it once. I love the worker placement mechanism in this. The set collection ends up being fairly thinky, and you need to go through the game end scoring once before you really understand it, but I think if I played it again, I would really have fun with it. Zoo Break is a family weight cooperative game where you are trying to get all of the animals back into their enclosures before too many of them get to the zoo exit. This was such a charming game with a touch of humor and a little bit more difficult than I thought it would be based on the theme. So there you go, 30 games at the Dice Tower Retreat. I probably went over my 60 sentences by a little bit, but hopefully that gives you a taste for those games. I will be back again with another video. Please subscribe to my channel if you want to know when those videos come out. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter as @MeeplePhD, and I've got a blog at meeplephd.com. We'll see ya.